Once I left my abusive relationship, I took my abuser with me in the form of my own self abuse. And this is when I realized after my divorce, and I was still exhibiting abusive brain chatter. I'm not good enough. I've got to find a man. What's wrong with me? I can't make any money and I can't support myself. After so many years of abusing myself, I had this aha moment.
Welcome to Silent No Longer, where your past is a chapter and not the whole book. I'm Mesha, and I'm so glad you're here. This is a safe, judgment-free space for anyone healing from toxic or abusive relationships. Through faith and healing, I found my way forward, and now my purpose is to help others do the same. My hope is that you'll be reminded that you are not alone, your past does not define you, and healing is possible. If you are ready to take the next step, you can learn more in my book, Behind Closed Doors, schedule a free clarity call with me, or explore neurotransformation therapy coaching, now available to support you in rewiring limited beliefs and creating lasting change. Welcome back to Silent No Longer. Today I have Jacquie joining us. Jacquie is a certified life coach, speaker, retreat leader, and author to Silent Bully, A Journey from Abusive Brain Chatter to Self-Love. And I'm so excited to have Jacquie here to discuss abusive brain chatter with us because I know myself, I struggled after my relationships. Thank you so much, Jacquie, for being here. Can you just start out a little bit about telling your story?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, I suffer from what I called abusive brain chatter. I had some trauma in my childhood. My mother attempted suicide when I was 4 or 5 years old. And as a result of that, I started to create some beliefs. And one of them was that I had to be silent and not take up any space, or my mother would kill herself. I had to be good. I was labeled the angel. So, as I say in my book, while my angel basked in the sun, my devil sat in the shadow waiting to come out and beat me up. And
Mm.
and that's kind of what happened. And through my life, I exhibited addictive behaviors. I was addicted to food, to sugar. I was a binger and dieter, and my mother also was she was a wonderful woman, but she was a troubled woman, obviously, because she attempted
Mhm.
suicide many times. But she had a fixation with beauty, and so uh, I had three other sisters, but somehow she got fixated on me, that I needed to go to charm school to learn to be more of a lady because I didn't cross my legs. I have little chubby thighs, that so my legs don't cross very easily,
Mm.
and I bit my nails, and I was overweight, slightly. I mean, when I look back at photos, I think if she had just done nothing, I would have just grown into who I was. But so it took me to be on diets and Weight Watchers and gyms and charm school and nail salons. And so the message that I received growing up was that I'm not enough,
Mhm.
that unless I am pretty, I am not enough. And yet I was a very creative child, a very happy child, um, I was a very sweet child, and none of that got supported because of my mother's depression. So when I would have school events, my mother very rarely came. When I would I created the sixth grade graduation song, and I was so excited to share it with my family. And when I went out to when I went on stage, I realized nobody from my family was there. So it's not that they were awful. It's not that they were mean, but my mother was depressed, and so when I came home, she was lying on the couch depressed. But so what I'm trying to say is I never got supported for who I truly was, who I was as a child, and the loveliness of my soul. It just kind of got squelched down. My mother was also a rager. She'd get very angry at times and yell. So again, I had to suppress a lot of my feelings and learn that it was okay to cross boundaries. It was okay for her to yell and scream at me, or for her to, you know, um, she was a gambler as well. So she would cross boundaries in that respect, and she'd ask us to lie to our father, so that he didn't know she was gambling. And, so she would do things like that. And again, I say this not to say, "Oh, poor me," but to say
Mhm.
that these are the kinds of things that shape how we believe who we are as we grow up. So in the instance of being beautiful or pretty, as soon as the first man came along that I thought was good marriage material, a good-looking CPA, I went, "Oh, well, I wanna be Mrs. Him." And so I married him, and, of course, that doesn't always turn out well because I didn't know who I was, and
Mm.
my whole goal was to he was like my mother, he was a gambler. So my whole behavior was to, um, try to get love from him, and he was a narcissist and, an addict and emotionally unavailable and could be emotionally abusive, by gaslighting me, all the time. He had affairs and then would come home and gaslight me, and I worked so hard to make that marriage work because I
Mhm.
thought I was the rescuer. I was gonna change this man. I'm such a sweet, loving person. How could he not love me? And how could I not be the best person in the world for this man who was also, by the way, supporting me because I didn't feel, I went to college, but I never, uh, being a success was never something that was important in my family. It was more important to marry a nice man. And so although I went to college and stuff, that kind of behavior wasn't encouraged. It wasn't like, "Oh, wow, great job. You got on the dean's list."
Mhm.
So anyway, so I learned very early on that it was okay to cross my boundaries. It was okay to yell at me,
Mhm.
and that I had no power to speak back because one, if I did, you would abandon me, you would leave me, my mother would, and my husband would, because he always had a wonderful way of turning it around to be me. This again? Are you kidding me? You know, like I was a pain in the neck. And
Mhm.
I used to always say in my marriage, I'm hurt and you're angry. That doesn't make sense to me. I never understood that, how I could be feeling hurt because of something, some betrayal, and then he would get angry because I was hurt. Well, of course, now I know that's part of a toxic relationship and part of a narcissistic relationship. So anyway, I was sexually molested as a child, so I had very poor sexual boundaries as well.
Mhm.
And so I, then thought having sex was love. I, conflated that.
Yep.
So I was just grew up being this person who I wasn't. I was this wonderful, beautiful, lovely little child, happy child. I used to love making perfume, but suddenly I grew into being a chameleon. Whatever you wanted me to be, so you wouldn't yell at me or so you wouldn't leave me.
Mhm.
And I finally got the courage. I actually divorced my ex husband and then got so afraid I reeled him back in and we got married a second time and using sex as a hook. Um, so, I was a mess. I was a mess. I was a wonderful person in just in a shell. And
Mhm.
so finally, I was able to leave my ex husband and for good. And I realized that once I left my abusive relationship, I took my abuser with me in the form of my own self abuse. And this is when I realized, after many, many years after my divorce, and I was still exhibiting abusive brain chatter. I'm not good enough. I've got to find a man. What's wrong with me? I can't, I can't make any money and I can't support myself. All of these kinds of things after so many years of abusing myself, I had this aha moment. And it was when I was 42. And I was a single mother. One of my sons went to live with my mother because he was acting out, and I was in no position to set any boundaries, even with my son. Uh,
Mm.
and he needed more structure. And I was home, and it was a day off of work, some holiday, and I was laying in bed watching um, the soap operas, which I used to just, this was before Netflix, which was too bad because I could have at least binged on some good TV. But I was binging on soap operas. I think they started at 10 and they ended at 3 with General Hospital or 4 o'clock. Anyway,
Yeah.
and I was laying in bed and I had a box of frosted mini wheats. And I remember frosted mini wheats because they were the uh, perfect food to stop my brain. The first side had sugar, so I would suck off the sugar off the one side and then I would crunch on it. So I had the sugar and the crunch would quiet the brain, right? And I could go through a whole box of cereal in one sitting. And so there I was with my mini wheats. And throughout my life, I had severe asthma. It started probably after my mother's suicide attempt when I couldn't breathe. It was like a,
Mhm.
I can't breathe and I better not breathe and I better not take up oxygen. And so it manifested itself in asthma. And it was severe my whole life on steroids for much of my life, many hospital visits. And so there I was in bed with my inhaler, which I didn't go anywhere without, puffing on my inhaler, watching TV, and eating these frosted mini wheats. And it's just like for a moment I caught a glimpse of myself and I said, I can't do this anymore. What are you doing? This isn't working for me. How do I stop this? I don't know how to stop this. I was such an addict. I don't know how to stop overeating. I don't know how to stop isolating. I don't know how to stop um, all of the negative behaviors that I had. At that time, I was working, I got a wonderful job. Uh, just surprise, surprise. And even I was surprised that I got this job. And and I was working though 60 hours a week to prove that I was worth 40. So I was like the first one in, the last one to leave, sat at my desk during lunch because I thought at any moment they were going to find out that I was a fraud, that I wasn't, really good for the job. And yet it was right up my alley. It was very creative. And so I just said, no, I can't do this anymore. But then I said, I don't know how to change.
Mhm.
I knew that at that moment something had to change and I was so powerless to change that kind of self-abuse. I just knew I was abusing myself and I just was powerless to change it. So at that moment I got on my knees, and I'm not a religious person, but I am a spiritual person. And I got on my knees and I got as low as I could get, just humbling myself, saying, I can't do this anymore. What do I need to do? How do I get out of the situation where I'm at? And a voice came loud and clear, get help, get support for your overeating, get therapy for your past traumas, go get help.
Mhm.
Stop working 60 hours, start working 40 hours, and go get help during that lunchtime. And that's what I did during my lunch breaks. I went to a support group for people who had binge eating disorders like I did. And instead of working then 60 hours, I took my full hour lunch and I got a therapist and I started really evaluating myself, taking an inventory of who I was and who I wasn't and who I wanted to be. And then I got the support to become that person. And it took many years, Misha. It wasn't like
Mhm.
overnight, but
Oh, yeah.
that became my goal, is to find another higher voice that was going to love me and to become that beautiful soul that I was as a child. It was now up to me to do that. I could stop blaming my parents. I'd been in therapy for many years before that, since I was like 16 or 17, because I was acting out. My parents sent me to therapy, um, and although that was helpful to get me through all of that, I knew that there was something more I needed. There was something of a spiritual nature that I needed to get me through the rest of my life. And that's when I started to make all the changes in my life. And as a result, I mean, just fast forward, I I ended up leaving the company I was with and opening my own company that raised $15 million for nonprofits, and I had like
Mm.
5 employees. Got into a very healthy relationship with someone who absolutely adored me and was not afraid to share intimate feelings with, vulnerable feelings with me, and um, was just like a salve for my soul. And I grew. I went back to school to become a psychologist, and then I became a life coach because I felt like life coaching was the answer. It just felt like the answer to me. And I'm not dissing therapy at all. I think therapy is really important. It's kind of like excavating the bones. But I really wanted change. And I knew that in order to change, I needed to have someone coach me every step of the way. And I knew that being a life coach, I could do that with others because I had a lot of people who I was mentoring at that time. And so in my work as a life coach, I realized that people don't make as much progress during the coaching process as they do in a spiritual process. They
Mhm.
have to get from out of the head and into the heart in order to really make change was what I found. So I went back to school and got my spiritual coaching credential and my relationship coaching credential because I also realized that people don't know how to set boundaries in relationships. So in my work as a life coach, I started using these tools that I had applied in my own life. And I started to realize that people had very bad abusive brain chatter, that the abusive brain chatter that I thought was so bad was really was prevalent in almost every single one of my clients. And so I really felt that we needed to start a movement to tap into that self-love and learn how to grow and how to explore it and make it no longer okay. And so I called it abusive brain chatter because I thought that's exactly what it was. It felt like my emotional abuser in my marriage. It felt like all of the things that I would hear from my parents and my mother and my and all of and my relationships that those I was doing to myself. So that's when I set upon the goal of writing this book and really focusing my coaching practice on abusive brain chatter and changing that. I know that's a long story, but that is my story. And today I'm happily married. I live in 2 places, Guanajuato, Mexico, and Bend, Oregon, and, my life is better than ever. I just don't allow that self-talk anymore to hold me back from doing anything.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. Absolutely loved it. I have a lot in common as a child in the same aspects as you, and it's just kind of funny because I always thought that I was the only kid who ever lived like that. So hearing you share your story as you were a kid growing up, I'm like, "Oh, there's other people out there like that." So I thought that was great. Um, yeah, because I was the person who stayed quiet, stayed out of the way, did what I was supposed to do, um, take care of myself, don't be noticed because, that way you're not caught up in everything else that was around you.
Mhm.
So yeah, and then you talked about how you were sexually molested and you were, you know, basically learned that sex or sexual contact is love. Same with me. Had the same thing happen to me. So anybody who paid attention to me, they won the prize. And I'm just like,
Right.
oh, this person's paying attention to me. They like me. And it's like, I, I, I like think to myself, if I could just go back to my, teenage self and just be like, look, no, that's just, it's not okay. But, um, so yeah, I mean, I know you have to give yourself grace, a lot of things happen in your life, but you just have to give yourself grace and realize you can't go back and change those things, but you can learn from it and, continue to heal and grow where you're at now. So, but yeah.
Along that lines, it's interesting that you mentioned that, anybody who likes me, what was it? Because, in my book, I talk about the pick me, that all
Mhm.
I cared about was that they liked me. And after my work, the shift that happened in terms of relationships for anybody who's out there listening and who is seeking a healthy relationship, I had to learn to change that to why would I pick you?
Mhm.
And not pick me. I had to start going out on dates with the sole purpose of seeing what I liked in that person. And it wasn't to get into a relationship, it wasn't to I in fact, I used to wear the same dress when I would go out on a date so that I knew it wasn't about what I looked like. It was
Mhm.
more about, um, what I could be neutral, and in that case, I could start looking at the men that I was dating and saying, "Hmm, I like that quality. I like that quality. That's a nice quality." And if I dated them, it was because I was interviewing them instead of them interviewing me. It was a wonderful shift in my dating.
Mhm. That's good because I got divorced almost 2 years ago now, and I haven't really dated. And people ask me, "Are you ever gonna start dating?" For one, I don't like how dating is done today. I'm more of a '90s girl, I want them to ask me out. I don't want to put all the effort into everything. One, I'm still don't know if I trust myself enough for that. Still learning a lot about, boundaries and relationships. I've come a long ways with boundaries. And then, not brushing things off. Like, if somebody says something that makes my nervous system kind of give me that alert, there's a reason for it, and I should probably listen to it and not just, "Oh, give an excuse," wipe it away and continue on my way.
Right.
So, that's what I'm learning a lot right now, and some days I'm sitting here and I'm like, "Goodness, all these people come on my show and they're like, 'Oh, I am so happy in my relationship now,' and I just sit here and I feel like I'm going to be single forever because now that I'm learning things will trigger me, even with, like, friendship. Something will happen and it will trigger me so hard, but I've noticed what it is that is triggering me and why I'm responding the way that I'm responding. And I have to take a couple of days and really just think about it, why am I feeling this way? When was the last time I felt this way? Who made me feel this way? What was happening? All those things so I can really digest it. Cause I mean, when you're in healing, it's an everyday thing. It's not just 6 months and done, "Oh, you're healed." No, you're learning something every single day, and people come into your life and will teach you something, and then the next person, and the next person, so,
Well,
yeah,
it's
I've
interesting because, just so you know, I was single 10 years. I had a couple of relationships, and what I know about this healing process is, 1, do not enter into a sexual relationship too quick. I learned that. That was
yeah,
I had a 10-date rule. It's like after 10 dates, but I
yeah,
didn't learn it took a while to learn that.
mhm,
Um, and the other thing was, that I needed to have somebody that I could talk the red flags through.
mhm,
So, in other words, when I'd go out, I just started dating for the sake of learning what red flags were. So it didn't matter. I didn't care that I was single 10 years. I mean, of course, I was lonely, but I needed to learn how to walk away from relationships. And I did
yeah,
have a wonderful relationship that, I just fell deeply in love with this man. Uh, but I knew there were some red flags and I knew I had to walk away. And
mhm,
so learning that process of letting go of what doesn't work is really, really crucial. And you can't do that in a couple of, I don't believe. I'm really
no,
surprised at people who leave toxic relationships and get back into one in a couple of years. That's wonderful if they can do it. But my experience is that I would keep attracting people that eventually would morph into
Yeah.
things that I didn't like about
Mhm.
my previous relationship, and it took a little while to know those flags. So it's perfectly okay to take time. There's plenty of time. And I also leaned into my spirituality finally. Was really a turning point for me when I said, "You know what? Okay, higher power, whatever you want to call it, Mother Mary, Earth, creative force, I'm going to just go take care of myself, okay? And I'm going to make myself better. And what I'd like of you to do is you go take care of that person. You go find me that soul that is a good match for me. And when you think I'm ready, would you introduce us?" And so it was a way I could just let go and go, okay, well, when I'm ready, that soul will be introduced to us. And that was my experience. There were so many coincidences with the man I finally met when I just let go and said, okay, I let my higher power be my matchmaker and I'll be okay in the meantime. I'm going to work on my career. I'm going to work on my health. I'm going to work on all of these wonderful things. Excuse me and just allow that spiritual part of me to know when I've met that person. And it was like my son's name is Michael and my last name, Michael, and his middle name is Elliott. And when I got a blind date and he called me, he said his name was Michael Elliott. And it was like I got this really weird feeling. I said, "You're kidding." And he said, "No, that's my name." And I thought, wow, this is weird. I'm going to pay attention to this because I need to be hit over the head. And, after we started going again, my 10 date rule, and I started learning who this person was and the similarities that we had. And it just felt like uh, it just felt like my soulmate. And when we finally touched and were intimate, it felt like our skin just melded into each other. I know that sounds really bizarre, but I just knew that this was the soul that was meant that I was meant to pay attention to, and it did. It was the best thing I ever did. As a result of that relationship, I wasn't beaten down. Instead, I was built up, and boy, boo, did my life take off. So, I just want to share that with you. It's okay to wait. It's okay to allow someone to allow your higher power to be your matchmaker.
That's really sweet.
Perfectly
Thanks for
okay.
sharing that. Oh, goodness. I love that. It's so nice. You said growing up, you didn't know who you were. And I feel like growing up, I didn't know who I was either. But it was because I think I was trying to be anything anybody wanted me to be or be who they needed me. I think it's more of being who they needed me to be. Just to keep peace in life or make sure that they were happy or whatever. And that's something that's been talked a lot on my podcast. And I get thinking about that a lot. And that's how I am. And I've noticed that I'm still kind of like that. And then I'm like, okay, I have to check myself and
Mhm.
ask myself, okay, are you doing this because this is who you are and what you want to do? Or are you falling into making this person happy, and doing all the things that they want to do? Like, what are they doing for you? Sort of thing. Because it's not just one sided. And like friendships, relationships, whatever. I mean, I don't know. So I really feel like I definitely learned that at a very, very young age.
Well, I'm gonna lay something on you that when I lay it on my clients, they go,
Okay.
I say people pleasers are the most dishonest people you will ever meet. And I think of myself as an honest person, and I am a
Hmm.
people pleaser. I still have to keep that in check just like you do. I'm an empath, so I have to realize that is this empathy coming from a place of needing to fix, or is it coming from a place of genuinely empath? But when
Hmm.
I coupled to the fact that I was being dishonest, when I always thought of myself, I'm so honest. I mean, my mother was uh, was so dishonest, such a liar, lied to my father, lied to us, she just so I swore that I was never gonna be like my mother and never be dishonest, and I'm such an honest person. I mean, if you give me too much at the grocery store, I'm gonna go back and give you back that nickel. That's how honest I thought I was, or I am partially. But when you're a people pleaser, you're not showing your real self to people. You are being dishonest. You are showing them this as
Mhm.
opposed to this. And that's not fair because when suddenly you find what you're doing is manipulating them. And when they don't behave the way you want them to behave, then can become the victim. And being a people pleaser is the greatest way to become a victim. Oh, I did all of this for you and I'm doing all this and you're so nasty to me. Well, it's my job to set up the boundaries, not your job. When I left my ex husband, I was angry and all of those things. But what I later learned and what I actually made an amends, I apologized to him maybe 15, 20 years later. He hadn't given me child support. He cheated on me. He had done all of these horrible things. But I later went to him and I said, I realized that I was not very honest in our relationship and I was manipulating you to love me and to give me what I wanted, even though I knew you weren't the right person for me. Even though I knew you couldn't give me what I wanted, I was going to extract it out of you. And I really want to apologize for that because I made you a scapegoat. I should have left that relationship the first time I discovered you were having an affair, like 3 months into the relationship. But I didn't have good boundaries. So instead, I kept you captive and I got angry at you and I made you feel bad and I cried and I did all of these things. I never showed you who I really was and what I really wanted. I allowed you to trample me. And for that, I'm really sorry because I kept you hostage for 15, 20 years. And I knew you couldn't give me what I want, but I couldn't let go. So I really apologize. Now, the look on his face was like I'd never seen. I think he went pale as a ghost because he knew all of the things that he had done in the relationship that I had
Mhm.
allowed him to do in the relationship. I had allowed him to cheat. I had allowed him to lie. One more time. That's it. This is the last time. And and he just looked at me and he just went pale. And he didn't apologize to me. That was, he's a narcissist. He's never going to apologize. I don't think he apologized to my children either. He's just not that way. But that was perfectly okay with me. I was free. I felt so free in that moment when I realized that it's my job to be who I am. And when I'm a people pleaser, I'm crossing boundaries. I'm crossing your boundaries by being dishonest and trying to make you think I'm something I'm not. And it was really good. I really love that. I mean, I didn't have to beat myself up for it. It was just a realization that I am no longer a victim in my life. If I am a victim, if I allow people to hurt me, that's on me. That is
Mhm.
not on them anymore. I was a product of my upbringing. So, of course, like you say, we've learned. But now that I know, now I have to act different. And so I ask myself all the time, am I a victim? Well, no. Did I speak up and tell them I didn't like that behavior? No. Now what do I have to do? I have to learn to speak up. This is one of those things I have to learn. I have to learn communication in a
Mhm.
healthy way. And a lot of my clients, the relationship clients, have trouble with boundaries. So, I have this Bill of Rights. You have a right to say no. You have a right to speak your mind. You have a right to speak kindly. You
Mhm.
have a right to set boundaries. All of these things you have a right to do. But I understand that if you're not doing them, you probably don't know how because
Yeah.
your boundaries were crossed. And so now it's on you to go to school and learn how you set healthy boundaries. because you want to be true to who you are. And it's so much easier to put it on someone else and just try to be who we want to be. I call it pretzeling, and I ask myself all the time, am I pretzeling? Am I trying to, you know, if am I trying to fit into what they are? And I have a buddy, I believe in the buddy system. You have buddies who call you on stuff. I had a buddy who called me on my red flags. I'd be able to go on dates and come back and say, here's a red flag, here's a red flag, here's a red flag. And I have a buddy who calls me on am I being codependent, or am I being, a people pleaser when I do this, this, and this? And I have to check my motives. So it's an ongoing process, but here's the good news, Misha. It's so much fun. When you like
Mhm.
yourself, it's now fun because you are no longer, like I said, a victim or a captive of yourself. You go, oh, well, that's so cool. I just realized I did that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting that you described it like that, because that's not what I thought people pleasing was like. I don't know. I feel like when I meet somebody, I sit back, I have my wall up. I won't really interact too much. I'll listen and I'll watch and I'll pay attention because that's what I did my entire life. I had to pay attention to my surroundings and all the people to make sure I was
Mhm,
safe because nobody else was making sure I was safe. And so I still do that with people. And it takes me a while to open up and
mhm,
actually, I don't know, I guess talk and let them know information about me because
mm,
I've had information about me used against me so much.
right.
Um,
Sounds like a
so
good,
I
healthy boundary.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it takes a while, and I don't let just anybody in. If I don't like something, if something rubbed me wrong in conversation, I won't let you into my world, and I have very few people in my world.
Right.
But I mean, I don't know. I just feel like sometimes I get into, okay, well, this person, I don't know, likes to do this thing or likes to talk about this thing, and I'll listen a lot, but I won't really talk. And then I feel like I'm just there for them. You know what I mean?
Mhm,
But, I mean, that's not true. They want me to communicate back and they wanna, like, hear my side on things, but I don't know if it's just I feel like it's something I need to work on, and because 'cause I'm just so used to being silent. Like, after my
mm,
divorce, I wouldn't talk. I wouldn't talk at all. I had to have a friend teach me that it was okay to talk, and then I had to learn how to talk. I had to learn how
mhm.
to communicate. And then after that, I had to learn how to feel safe enough with somebody to tell them if I didn't like something or something they said, hurt my feelings or made me upset, and then how to communicate that to that person. And it's a learning process, especially when you're not used to it.
Mhm.
You're
And
just
it
used
takes
to
time.
yeah.
It's interesting because, um, that is the issue with relationships, and it
Mm,
is if you don't have healthy boundaries. See, I said I didn't trust my picker. That's what I called it.
yeah.
I would go out on dates and I couldn't trust my picker because, like you said, if somebody showed me attention, and that's why I had to learn to trust my picker. But what you said is really important. First, I had to learn how to say no, well, ooh, or ouch, or, I prefer not to talk about that, um, or whatever. But what was important is that I wasn't going out on dates just talking about them and
Mhm.
feeding their ego, that I was able to say who I was because I had uh, I'll remember this is hilarious. My first date after I got divorced, I went out with the guy and all I did was talk about my divorce and my ex-husband. And he was a setup, a blind date from my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law came back to me and said, what did you do? This guy said all you did was talk about your relationship and your trauma and all of this. And I said, I know I'm probably not ready to date because that was a boundary, right? You don't talk about that. I always say to my clients, don't connect on trauma. If you're
Yeah.
connecting with somebody on your traumas, that's the wrong person for you. You need to connect on your healthy. the healthy part of yourself. You don't talk about your traumas on dates. That's a boundary issue. And so that's what I'm saying is if you don't trust your boundaries, it's so much harder to go out on dates and enter into relationships because you don't trust that you can see what you see and you know and that you can actually put a stop to something that's uncomfortable. And so
Mhm.
learning to say, I really appreciate, I call it the whole the kind of donut. I teach people how to do that by saying, I really appreciate your enthusiasm when you talk about politics, but I'm not comfortable talking about politics. I prefer talking about, other things. Would you mind if we changed the subject? So there I appreciated them. I said my feelings and I asked for something. And so
Mhm.
that's a good way to set a boundary is to, acknowledge the other person's point of view. Tell your point of view, say what boundary you need, and then ask for it. And so it can do anything. It can be, I really appreciate that you work hard to go out that you work hard to, that you work all day, but when you come to the dates late, when you're late, I start to feel a little anxious. So I'm wondering if I could ask you in the future if you would show up on time. Would that be okay with you? And so that's a beautiful way to ask people, acknowledge, and state your position and then ask and make sure you get a yes or no. And if it's a no, then this is not a person who you can trust or who you want to trust. So that's a great way to think about boundaries. And I would say to people, just write that down. Acknowledge, state your point of view, and ask for what you need from a relationship, from your husband. I know you work really hard and on weekends you don't want to do much work, but the garage is driving me crazy because I can't park my car in there. Can we find a solution where we can both work together on Sunday to clear out the garage? Or can you pick a day that works for you?
Yeah,
Those are always great ways to set boundaries.
that's good. Thanks for sharing that. So, brain chatter. So, mine I've noticed is a lot of you're not good enough, you're never gonna finish anything you started, and you're never gonna make it because that's what I was always told all the time from everybody. And it wasn't the fact that any of those things were true. It's the fact that they didn't want it to be true. So, I
Right.
still struggle with that, like, some days I'm like, "I need to get up, I need to do this, I need to do that," and I'm really hard on myself, and then I'll overwork myself, and my body will pretty much crash because I'm doing too much, and so healthy boundaries with myself, with work, because of the negative brain chatter that I have, from hearing all my life, so,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, this brings me, if you'd like, I can get into my tools in my book and how my book lays out this process so
Mhm.
that you can change the chatter.
Okay.
So it starts with awareness. And you have a little bit of awareness, I'm hearing. So you're
Mhm.
aware that you do say these things, but it's important to get them down on paper, to what I say is just a stream of consciousness to kind of allow them to all come forward, and then um, learn the signs of a emotional abuse, because that's why I call it abusive brain chatter. You're
Mhm.
your own victim of your own things. When you say to yourself, "I'm not good enough," what are you doing?
Putting
You're
myself down.
belittling yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're belittling yourself, which is emotional abuse. If
Yeah.
you say, "I'll never do that," what is that?
Is that the emotional abuse or is that, psychological abuse?
Well, both.
Both of them. Yeah. I was thinking
Yeah,
it was tied together. Yeah.
yeah, it's both. What it's doing is it's gaslighting you,
Yeah.
and gaslighting is, uh, definitely it's your
Mhm.
sign, "You're not good
Right.
enough." Well, who said? That's not true. You're saying it as if it's the truth. That's also belittling, demeaning. If you use, uh, addictive substances to quiet the voice, that's kind of isolating, and that's what an abuser does. "Here, shut up, don't talk. I just don't try anything. Don't go out there."
Mhm.
And here's the secret. Here's a really funny little thing. Your abusive brain chatter thinks it's protecting you. So the meaner it gets, the more it's protecting you, or it thinks it's protecting you. So the first thing to do is to write down. I love the stream of consciousness writing. I love the artist's way where you just put pen to paper first thing in the morning and you just start writing whatever comes to mind. You don't pick up the pen until you get to the end of 3 pages. And I recommend that. Always recommend journaling when you have abusive brain chatter. Let's hear what it's saying. You know, be like Jane Goodall, I talk about in my book, and just kind of say to yourself, "Oh, that's interesting. You know what? I just said I'm not good enough," or "I just wanted to write a book and I just said, oh, you'll never finish it." Just start writing down these thoughts and then write down the opposite thought. Uh, and write down what type of bullying it is. In my book, I list out emotional abuse. You can look up,
Mhm.
go to ChatGPT or look up what
Yeah.
is emotional abuse. And then just start writing down, oh, this is emotional abuse. Oh, this is blah, blah, blah. So now you're aware of emotional abuse and you're aware of the things that you're saying to yourself. With love, this is not a time to criticize yourself and say, "Oh, there I go again saying horrible things about myself. I'm never going to change." No, this process of awareness is all about love. Okay. So the second step of the ABCs of abusive brain chatter is believe. And this is where you tap into your higher source, where you find your loving source.
Mhm.
So I have a lot of clients in my spiritual practice who can't say the word God. They can't believe in God. They were born into a religion where God was punishing. And I say, find whatever it is that you can, that feels good when you tap into it. Think of it as kind of creative flow. Think of it as you know, liquid gold or just white light or whatever you want it to be, and call it whatever you need to call it because you can't fix your brain using your brain. I couldn't argue with my brain and say, well, no, I'm not, I am good enough because my brain would say, no, you're not. Here's proof. And so I could never do that. So I had to tap in and go, I'm not good enough. Wait a minute. That that doesn't feel good. In fact, imagine it. What does it feel like in my body to think I'm not good enough? Wow, it feels like bright red on my chest. That's what it feels like. And so just kind of stay with it and maybe send it white light. Or maybe if it feels like a heavy brick on your chest when you think of yourself, I'm not good enough. Think about what would it feel like to lift that brick off your chest, and just imagine that. So now you're into your body, okay? And you're not into your head. Now you're into your body and you're kind of taking away all of that negativity. And now you make room for source or whatever you want to call it. So, for the sake of this argument, let's call it higher power, um, or source or whatever. It's important for you to find that source and to discover what it wants for you and how loving it is. Because source always is about love. And I always say to people, if you're in a religion or if you're praying to a God who is punishing, in my mind, you haven't found source because source is all about love. And when you get there, right? If I just told you to now just take a nice deep breath and just allow yourself to settle into the source, you instantly feel relaxed, right? Your chest opens up a little bit. That's what we're going for. So part of the work I do is I guide my clients, my spiritual clients, back to the time they lost that source. When were they most pure soul? So if I were to say to you, if you just take a moment, think, when do you think you lost your soul? How old were you? Just go back into time, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is. And there's a place where you remember losing your soul. Do you remember it? Can you remember it?
Um,
How old were you?
I mean, it had to have been before I could remember, honestly. And then
If you
I
had
feel
to
like
put an age, 5, 4,
um, I don't know, maybe 3,
3. Okay.
maybe
So now I
younger.
want you so this takes a long time. This is a process that takes a long
Mhm,
time, but I'm just kind of rapidly going through it with you. So then
mhm,
what we would do is we would take a moment because you're there with your guide. I take you there with your guide to look at that soul. What is that soul? Who were you brought into this world to be, Misha? What are some of the qualities of your soul? And just name a few, just off the top of your head.
um, I'm a passionate person, I care about others, like, deeply, um, I don't know. I'm no good at questions like these.
Okay. So this takes time to do. It takes
Yeah,
time. So I'm putting you on the spot here, but I just kind of want the listener to see the process. So then
yeah,
we know that your soul is compassionate. We know that it's
mhm,
kind. We know that it's loving. So the work we do is we bring it back and through a meditation, guided meditation, we bring you back your soul.
mhm,
And now it's yours, Misha. It's yours to take care of. You are now at the age where you can set boundaries for this soul and where you can honor this soul and let this soul grow. That's your work to be done now. And you do
mhm,
that spiritually by tapping into all of that loving creative source. There's meditations you can do, there's journaling, you can write dear higher power letters. Whatever it is, I do that sometimes when I'm kind of stuck and and I need to tap into my intuition. I'll say, Dear higher power, blah, blah, blah. What do I need to do? Give me an answer. And then I wait for the answer to come. So that's the
mhm,
B part. And I know we're running out of time and I want to get to the C part, which is challenging your core beliefs. So as core beliefs come up, like you said, I'm not good enough, or you'll never finish that. That's a good example because I had that one. So then I start to set goals, small baby goals that I can achieve so I can prove to myself that I can finish. And the studies show that you get a dopamine hit every time you finish a goal. So when you say
mhm,
I want to lose weight or I want to build my business here. I want to build my podcast. Well, that's kind of a out there goal, right? We have to bring it down to an achievable step. The SMART goals, people, you can look up SMART goals.
yeah,
So you might say, okay, I really want this to be a podcast that reaches thousands. So then you have to say, okay, what's a small goal that I can set today that I can achieve? Well, maybe it's finding good speakers, or maybe it's finding a sponsor. Maybe it's just doing a podcast. Maybe it's, just one small goal. What could you think of what action could you take this week to build your business?
um, edit reels and post them on social media.
Okay. So we're going to break it down even farther. We're going to
Okay,
say your goal for this week is to edit reels. You're going to edit one reel or two reels, let's say. You can do more, but that's your
mhm,
goal. You're going to edit two reels by the end of what's today, Friday, by the end of next Friday. Okay.
mhm,
There, you've achieved your goals. Now we set further goals. I mean, you may end up posting them. We don't know because you're going to feel good after you do these. But the point is you challenge your belief that you can't finish, because what you can't finish is about is It's too big out there and I'm not good enough and I don't know how. And so you have to challenge that belief and say, yes, I know how and I can finish. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep finishing small tasks. For example, in my book, I talk about I felt like I was not, because of my asthma, I was weak and I couldn't finish and I could never join a marathon. And I always wanted to. I always thought those people were magic, the people who could run marathons. So at the age of 50, I joined a triathlon. Now that's running, swimming, and bike riding. And
Yeah.
my sole goal was to finish. Didn't care. So I practiced, I swam, I did all of that. Well, as it turned out, I had some trouble with my swimsuit, my wetsuit, and I had to be rescued from the water. But I swam a half hour in the water, and and then I got on my bike and I rode the 25K, and then I ran. And I came in absolutely dead last. Police were behind me on their motorcycles holding back traffic. And when I came down, the things came down, those little posts that mark your thing. And I came in last and I went, hot damn. I finished. I did it. Now I can do anything. And the way you do it is you don't say, I can't do that or I won't finish. You
Mhm.
say, how can I finish? And that's what I always say, people write that big and put on your mirror. How can I do that? Not I can't, but how can I? And then just start breaking it down into little steps.
Mhm.
So those are the three things that I say ABC, ABC, ABC. Your abusive brain chatter comes up and tells you you're not good enough to write a book. Say you want to write a book about your experience. You just say, okay, um, I'm hearing myself say all these negative things. I'm going to write them down, but I'm going to write positive affirmations now and say, yes, I am a writer and I can write a book. And then you
Mhm.
say, okay, I need to tap into my higher source and I need to say, I need you to guide me. I need you to help me. I need to get this out of my head. This writing, this book is coming from my heart, and I need you to guide me every step of the way and show me how I can do it. And then C is you then set your small goals and you challenge. Who told me that? My mother told me I couldn't do that. Well, she's not around anymore, and I kind of release you. There's other exercise I have where you release your mother. Okay, I don't
Mhm.
need to carry that anymore. I'm going to release that and I'm going to create some new beliefs. And that's how you change your chatter. And it happens to me all the time. Before I come on this, am I gonna look good enough? Is this it doesn't matter. I'm coming on to share my message with people. I
Mhm.
want to share my message. No one cares what I look like,
Yep.
and that's okay. And here's what I have to share. So that honors my soul because my soul is a loving, caring soul who's meant to heal people. That's what I believe I
Mhm.
came here for. So anyway, so I know I've gone on, but I'm so passionate about this, and my book just outlines it. And I've got my stories in my book, um, and I really hope anybody listening to this, if there's one takeaway, it's that self love is not bad. Self love is a superpower. That it's the norm. It's what we aspire to. It's not
Mhm.
conceited. It's not irresponsible. It's not anything. It's self love is what we aspire to. It's what we were brought into earth to do, to honor our self love so that we can be loving to others.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing all of that. That was really good. I really liked how you talked about breaking down your goals because people tell me that all the time. They're like, break them down smaller. I never understood what they meant by that because I'm like, how can it be any smaller? But because to me, that was a small goal. You can break it down any small, and you broke it down smaller. And I was like, oh, that's what people mean by that.
Exactly.
So, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Is there anything that you want to advertise about yourself? Anything, your book or anything you have coming up
Well,
you're working
yes,
on?
I hope I got my book here,
Mm.
The Silent Bully. Uh, and it's available on Amazon, The Silent Bully, A Journey from Abusive Brain Chatter. And my website is healingabc.com. And I'd love if you're interested in more materials, I'm going to be starting workshops and doing things like that. Just go on my website, Healing ABC, and subscribe, and you'll be on my email list. Next year, I'm hoping to do a retreat based all around this, based around self love, a week long, maybe here in Mexico. Where we actually day by day, we dive into these tools. We are creative. We take silver making classes, art. We do drumming. We do meditation. And by the time you leave, you're going to be so clear with how to practice self love that it's going to be like nails on a chalkboard when you hear anything negative.
That's
So
awesome. That sounds amazing.
definitely sign up and yeah, and if you have any questions, email me. I think my email is on there. I'm always happy to take questions. That's what my soul is meant to do, is to help. So if you're stuck anywhere, you just write me a question and I'll always reply.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
If today's episode spoke to your heart, be sure to follow me and follow Silent No Longer so you never miss a new episode filled with healing and hope. Please share this episode with someone who may need to hear it. You never know the impact it could have. If you're ready to take the next steps in your own healing, you can take my free quiz to see if you may be in a toxic relationship. Schedule a free clarity call with me or read my story in Behind Closed Doors. Thank you for listening to Silent No Longer. Your story isn't over and healing is possible.